That tightness that you feel in your hips, that is just the symptom, and that is why endless stretching does not give you the relief that you're looking for. Instead, we need to be asking and addressing why hip tightness is happening in the first place. In this video, I'm going to go through a completely different approach to unlocking your hips, one that doesn't require you to sit in passive stretches endlessly, just hoping that something changes. So like many people, I used to think my hips were naturally tight, and no matter how much stretching I did, I could get some temporary relief, but hours later, my hips would just feel locked up again. And this really inhibited my ability to progress in my calisthenics journey. Some movements required me to be relatively open through my hips, like the handstand press, and also just felt very limited in basic positions like deep squats. And I tried everything. I tried foam rolling, getting a lacrosse ball in there, trying to hold for longer stretch times. But what I didn't realize was that what I actually needed to focus on was creating space through the joint to actually allow for that free-flowing movement, and I'm going to go into this. So what I'm going to do in this video is explain why stretching alone doesn't actually help, and then I'm going to show you some specific movements that you can implement that will actually create lasting change with your hip mobility. So the best place to start is going back to when you're a kid and you just had the most easy, free-flowing movement. And this is just proof in the pudding that you weren't born with tight hips. When you were a kid, you could get into a deep squat, you could play with your friends, you could run, hike, twist, bend, rotate, reach, grab, climb with absolute fluidity and ease. But somewhere along the way, we lost that. And for most people, it's just the fact that we stopped moving. We stopped challenging our joints to move in all these different directions. And what the nervous system does is when it's not familiar with particular range of motion, when it forgets how to move into a particular range of motion, it locks you up in that specific range. And that's where hip tightness sets in. Your body is basically just creating a protective mechanism where it says, I'm not familiar going here, and in order to protect you, I'm not going to allow you to go here. So how do we actually fix this? Well, the first step is understanding how the hip actually creates movement. The hip is a pretty complex joint. It's a ball and socket joint, and in order for the hip to move freely through extension, flexion, abduction, adduction, internal, external rotation, basically all the different motions of the leg, the femur needs to have enough space inside of the socket to easily glide, shift, and rotate. And when it doesn't, it becomes very jammed, and that's where that hip tightness and that locked up feeling sets in. And this usually happens when the muscles that are responsible for all these different ranges, for the abduction, adduction, internal, external rotation, when they're weak and underused, then the joint can't actively create that space. It loses what's called joint centration, which is where the femoral head is properly positioned inside of the socket. And no amount of stretching or foam rolling can fix that if you're not able to actively pull your femur into the right position. Your body will basically start protecting a joint that doesn't have the strength to stabilize itself, and then your nervous system shuts it down and limits the movement capability. So let's go into some movements that will help us to solve this. The first thing you need is some form of hip CARS. CARS refers to controlled articulate rotations, which is basically where we take a joint, this could be any joint, through its full range of motion. So we're working the joint through every different direction actively. Now, you can think about this in the context of what I just explained, where in order for the femur to get free movement inside the pelvis, it needs to be strong in all directions. This movement is going to do just that. One of my favorite variations for the hips is a side lying position. So you're simply lying on your side, keeping your spine nice and straight, and then you've got both knees bent to 90 degrees up towards your chest. Now, as mentioned, we're going to go through every different range of motion through the joint. So the first thing you'll do is just pull your knee into your chest. From there, you'll bring your knee out to the side, which is working abduction. And then what we're going to do is twist the foot back to work internal rotation. And then we'll drive the knee behind us to work hip extension. And then we'll come back to center to finish the loop. So in that one motion, we've worked flexion, abduction, internal rotation, extension, and then we've come back to center. And now to work the remaining range of motion, we're going to simply move in the opposite direction. So the first thing we're going to do is drive back into hip extension, where the knee comes behind the body. And then we're going to externally rotate by pulling the foot forwards as we bring the knee up to the shoulder. And then we're going to get a bit of flexion again by bringing the knee up towards the shoulder. And then we're going to bring the knees level again. So all in all, we're training every range of motion against gravity. And this is a nice active movement, so we don't want to be collapsing through the spine. We want to be nice and strong with the core, hence why we've got the knee in towards the chest. That helps us not to extend and open with the spine. And this is a movement where you want to do kind of 5 slow, controlled reps where you're hitting the maximum point in each position, and you want to do 5 in both directions. When you move the joint in a full circle like this, you're getting your nervous system familiar with every different range of motion. So when it shows up in day-to-day life, whether that's in sport, running, hiking, whatever, it's going to feel more confident because it's familiar with that position. The next thing we want to do is we want to challenge what we've learned in the hip calves through a more loaded movement. And this is where the Cossack squat comes in. With the Cossack, we're working deep hip flexion, we're working internal and external rotation, we're working abduction and adduction all in one movement in a position that is loaded and I guess more applicable to real movement in real day-to-day life situations. So the setup for this is we want a nice wide stance and we can have our toes slightly pointed out to the side. We're then bending one knee and dropping down into that deep position. And what I like to do is keep the foot forward for as long as possible, and then only when we hit the end range and the pelvis is kind of in line with the knees, we start to rotate the foot back and sink deeper. Here we are challenging that hip rotation. As we rotate the foot back, we're going in more into the external rotation with the bending leg side. We're working that deep flexion, and then we can come up and go over to the other side. Now, there's loads of progressions for this movement. It's not something that you will be able to just jump straight into, and I don't want to go through it in this video because I actually made a whole tutorial just on the Cossack squat, and you can see that here. I think it'll be here, or it might actually be here. Let's see. And go watch that video because it's an incredibly valuable movement. It's a real fundamental for anyone who's wanting to become more functional, more mobile, to really truly unlock your hips. It's a movement that really teaches your pelvis how to stabilize under deep positions with load. And we can obviously continue to scale this movement by adding weight. So many people just never train their lateral mobility, so side-to-side movements, and then they wonder why when they play sport, especially things like tennis or football or paddle, and they move side to side, they start getting these complications through their hips, knees, and ankles. Please train lateral movements. It's so crucial. Okay, the third exercise is going to be hip aeroplanes. This exercise is going to challenge your hips' ability to stabilize and rotate while standing on one leg. It's quite an advanced movement, but it's a very effective way to build true hip stability. So for this movement, you're going to set up either freestanding in a room, or if you're new to it, I would start with a bit of support by having a foam roller or a similar object connected to your outer knee and then connected to a wall. You want a soft bend in the knee, and then you're going to hinge forward just like you would if you've done a single leg Romanian deadlift, keeping a straight line from your back foot all the way up to your shoulder, trying to keep your spine nice and straight with a bit of engagement through your core. Make sure that you're not going so far into this position that you start to really round and flex your spine. It kind of kills the mechanics of the movement. With these hip aeroplanes, we're going to work on hip rotation. So what you're going to think about here is twisting your pelvis in towards the front leg. Okay, and what we're doing is we're kind of moving the pelvis over the femur. So rather than getting rotation by moving the femur inside of the pelvis, we're now moving the pelvis over a more stable femur. And this, again, is actually more applicable to day-to-day movement. And what we want to really focus on here is creating a tripod with the foot. So we want to think about maintaining pressure through the big toe, the fourth toe, and then the heel. So we've got a really nice, stable base. So after we've twisted it in, we're then going to twist in the other direction. So starting to look towards the wall and then up to the ceiling. And also we can think about twisting so the toes kind of point up towards the ceiling to activate the glute medius to really challenge the external rotators. This movement is one of the best ways to teach your hips to control rotation in day-to-day movement. You're basically teaching your hip to maintain space through the joint even in unstable conditions. And that's how we truly bulletproof the joint. So there are 3 exercises you can implement into your routine. And when you do, your nervous system is going to start trusting these deep ranges because there's actually strength there to create that space and to give your nervous system the confidence that it can go there. And this is ultimately going to get rid of compensation patterns when you're doing movements in day-to-day life and your hips just don't have that free movement. So other areas start taking over, like your lower back, your knees, and that's where pain and training inefficiency steps in. My recommendation would be to do the hip cars every single day. There's no reason why you can't and why you shouldn't. And then we want to be doing the hip aeroplanes and the Cossack squats 2 2 to 3 times a week, and we can look to progressively overload both these movements with weight. We obviously want to make sure that we're nailing the movement first. If you found this video valuable and you got a little bit more insight into how to truly unlock your hips, and if you've maybe tried these movements now and they feel good for you, please let me know in the comments. Please like the video and please subscribe to this account. Thanks so much, and I'll see you on the next video.